Welcome, age of vintage society. The first time Deanna Durbin appeared on our screens, she was wearing a white dress with her hands clasped together, singing with such a pure and sweet voice that the audience loved her instantly. In the days when child stars were good and wholesome, Deanna Durbin was everyone's idea of the perfect girl next door, and the audience flocked to see this saintly singing sensation. Why was Deanna Durbin considered a cheap woman? As you all know how much I appreciate you, my viewers, I want to thank you for your generous comments and for the Patreons. This video would not have been possible without you, and thanks to those who watched the video right to the end. Film and musical directors also loved the money-spinning voice of the angelic-looking child. Films were created to fit her talent, personality and sweet feminine voice, which was extraordinarily powerful. However, less than 10 years and 20 films after winning a juvenile Oscar award at the age of 17, Deanna Durbin retired to Paris and withdrew from show business completely. What was life like for this talented child star who became the antithesis of Hollywood glamour despite her fame and cherished privacy? Born Edna Mae Durbin in Winnipeg, Canada on December 4, 1921, Deanna was the youngest daughter of James and Ada Durbin, who emigrated from Chester in England. Deanna loved to sing, and at the age of 1 she was attempting to sing along to her parents' nursery rhymes and other children's songs of the time. When Deanna was still an infant, her parents moved her and her older sister Edith to California, and they became naturalized in 1923, when Deanna was just 2 years old. Her father was a blacksmith on the Canadian Pacific Railway. By age 10 it had become apparent that Deanna was quite the singer, and her parents enrolled her in Ralph Thomas Academy. Very quickly she became the Academy's star pupil, and she was able to showcase her singing voice at local churches and clubs around Los Angeles. Deanna's first big break came in 1935 when she was just 14. MGM was looking to cast a young girl for the role of the young Ernestine Schumann Heink in their biography of the famous opera singer. The casting director, Rufus Lamari, had heard of a talented young girl singing at the Ralph Thomas Academy and invited her to audition. Deanna showed up and sang Il Bacio for them. They were stunned at her mature soprano voice, and when she sang for Louis B. Mayer himself, he instantly signed her up for a 6-month contract. Her first movie was Every Sunday with Judy Garland, who was to have a similar trajectory to Deanna. The two young girls were to perform together to showcase their talents and bounce off each other during the filming. But while executives were determining the box office merits of casting two girls together, Deanna's option expired. As soon as Universal discovered that Deanna was a free agent, they swooped on her, signed her up and changed her name from Edna Mae to Deanna professionally. Universal was facing serious financial problems and thought the newly branded Deanna Durbin looked like a good investment for their B-grade studio, and being a teenager, Deanna was a much cheaper investment for them all round. At the age of 14, she was starring in full-length feature films produced by Universal, starting with Three Smart Girls in 1936. It was very successful and launched Deanna's career as a young music star. Like Shirley Temple before her, she became an emissary to lift the spirits of Depression-era audiences. Under the tutelage of producer Joe Pasternak and director Henry Costner, she quickly became an overnight sensation as well as Universal's biggest asset. She then starred in a string of successful musical movies like 100 Men and A Girl Mad About Music, That Certain Age, Three Smart Girls Grow Up, and First Love between 1936 and 1939. On the side, when she had time, she was also applying for singing parts. At the age of 15, Deanna auditioned for a singing part in Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but was rejected as they felt her voice was too old for the part. The Metropolitan Opera secretary wrote to Deanna in 1936 offering her an audition after seeing her in the movies. She actually turned down the audition because she felt she needed more singing lessons before taking on such an advanced role within the company. In 1938 she received her only Academy Award along with Mickey Rooney. These special awards are at the discretion of the Board of Governors and specifically recognise actors that are under the age of 18 for their outstanding contribution to screen entertainment. Many of her musicals were shortlisted for inclusion in the Academy Awards, mostly in the musical or technical categories, but Mad About Music was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Original Story. However, she did start making a regular appearance on Eddie Cantor's radio show, where he helped guide and showcase the talents of rising stars like Diana Shaw, Bobby Breen, and of course Deanna Durbin. These shows continued from 1936 to 1939, when her workload at Universal got too heavy for her to continue her weekly appearances. Her roles were all formulated to put her in the role of Little Miss Fix-It. She would pull adults out of difficult situations that they found themselves in, and with a quick word of advice and an aria or a quick pop tune, suddenly everything turned out just fine in the end. Despite the formulaic storylines and the predictable ending, they gave Deanna a chance to look pretty and sing beautifully, and her movies became worldwide hits in a very short time. She was also recording for Decca Records at the time, with her singing voice in great demand, and she re-recorded many of her film hits to be sold on LPs. In 1938, when she was just 17 years old, Deanna had a star placed in her honour on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, outside the Grauman's Chinese Theatre at 1722 Vine Street. Her hit movies continued to roll out, with Spring Parade in 1940, and then It's a Date and Nice Girl in 1941. Deanna was very busy, and it's reported that she saved Universal from potential bankruptcy with her singing and acting ability. She married assistant director Vaughan Paul in April 1941 at the tender age of 19, but it was short-lived and possibly violent relationship with it, ending in divorce just 2 years later. In 1941, Deanna starred in It Started With Eve, her last film with director Henry Costa and producer Joe Pasternak at the helm. Pasternak was lured back to MGM for her next film, They Lived Alone, and she felt that not enough attention had been given to her new husband and refused the role. Universal Studios suspended her from October 1941 to February 1942, but they did spend the time sorting out their differences, and Deanna came out of the suspension with the right to approve her songs, directors and stories. A fight well worth having from her point of view. She became tired of playing the same character in the same plot with the same outcome, and was keen for a change in direction. She wanted to look glamorous and sultry rather than young and wholesome. The studio, however, preferred the tried-and-true Deanna Durbin formula. Deanna wished to become a more serious actor, so they rewrote They Lived Alone into The Amazing Mrs. Holliday, a story about a woman who smuggled World War II refugee children out of China. Initially, this film had no musical numbers, but under relentless pressure from the studio, Deanna gave in and added in a few. She also managed to re-script the second sequel of Three Smart Girls into Hers to Hold, a sequel that revolved solely around her character. She also dabbled in a romantic comedy, His Butler's Sister, and a musical western, Can't Help Singing, which was her only Technicolor film and shot on location in Utah. By 1944, Deanna was really pushing to become a more dramatic actor and ditched the girl-next-door image that she had traded on in her teen years. She starred in the darker film Christmas Holiday, where her character was a nightclub brothel performer. She badly wanted the role but had trouble dressing and acting as such. In the end, critics said that she wanted to look like a wholesome Deanna Durbin pretending to be a tramp. The movie received mixed reviews. She then married Felix Jackson, her 44-year-old producer, who had directed her in these more dramatic movies in 1945, and less than 6 months later they had a little girl, Jessica Louise. There may have been some haste to marry, as it's likely that Deanna wanted her first child to be born in wedlock. Her next movie with Felix was a whodunit. Lady on a Train also received mixed reviews, and as an attempt to diversify Deanna's image, it certainly did that, but the audience wasn't sure they liked her in these types of parts. Felix went on to produce all of her post-Pasternak films in the 1940s, with the exception of The Amazing Mrs. Holliday. By 1946, Deanna was the second highest paid woman actor in the United States, slightly behind Bette Davis, and Deanna's fan club was the largest one during her active years. According to a 1940s article, Deanna was being paid about $5,000 a week, including royalties from recordings and merchandising. in addition to a $1,000 bonus per film completed and a $100,000 bonus on completion of each season obligatory 2 films for Universal. She felt her dramatic roles were personally satisfying, but conceded that they didn't do as well at the box office as she had hoped. Her earlier typecasting was so ingrained that audiences simply didn't relate to her in the more serious roles. When Universal merged with 2 other companies in 1946 and created Universal International, the new board of directors discarded a lot of Universal usual movies, like the musicals, leaving only a limited number of them scheduled. The year that Universal merged was also the year that Felix left Universal Studios and Deanna, but it wasn't announced to the world until the following year. The marriage lasted 4 years. In 1947 and 1948, when she was around 27 years old, she made 4 more films: I'll Be Yours, Something in the Wind, Up in Central Park, and Love of Mary. They were all light musical comedies and really didn't do well. In 1949, Universal International announced their intention to sue Deanna for wages paid in advance. Deanna settled out of court by agreeing to do 3 more movies for them, including one that they wanted to shoot in Paris. None of the films she contracted to do made it to the production phase before her contract ran out, and Deanna took her final bow gracefully. It was 1948, just 12 years since she signed the original contract with MGM. It was at this point Deanna retired. She saw no future in musicals that she didn't want to make, and the audience had spoken with their feet and stayed away from the roles she felt she wanted to do, so she simply retired and moved to the village of Neaupole-le-Château, just outside Paris. She also filed for divorce from Felix, which was granted only a few months later, and enjoyed raising her daughter on the little farm they lived on. When Joe Pasternak tried to convince her to come back, she was quoted as saying, "I can't run around being a little Miss Fix-It who bursts into song, the highest paid star with the poorest material." Her severance pay was $20,000. Universal Studios made a mistake in not loaning Deanna out to MGM and 20th Century Fox for their big colourful musicals when they could. It would have increased her popularity and pushed their own films that starred Deanna. No matter the end result, the mishandling of her career hurt both the star and the studio. Just before Christmas in 1950, when Deanna was 28, she married the French director of Lady on a Train, 44-year-old Charles Henry David, and they had a son they called Peter. The family also included her daughter Jessica from her relationship with Felix. They lived on a farm on the outskirts of Paris and shunned both the press and the public. She lived on that farm for the next 60 years, as she had invested her movie money wisely and never had to work again. Deanna and her husband had a deal. He would protect her from spiders, mosquitoes and reporters, and she would take care of lions, tigers and dinosaurs. She claimed their deal worked. She hasn't given an interview or posed for a picture, and her husband can't remember the last time a dinosaur breathed down his neck. Offers for Deanna to come back to the stage and screen continued to pour in. She was offered Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, a lead role in the stage and film version of Kiss Me Kate, and a role in the operetta The Student Prince. She turned them all down. At the age of 28, she had had enough. Deanna was at the height of her fame, and her voice was still sublime. Even though her contract with Universal International had expired, she could have picked up work with numerous other studios that would love to have had her join them, but she had reached the point, 22 films into her career, where she had had enough and turned her back on Hollywood. In 1983, Deanna granted her one and only interview with film historian David Shipman. She talked about her dislike of Hollywood and the public's image of her. She thought that Deanna Durbin was just an entity created by Universal's publicity machine and was a byproduct of her singing talent and looks, not her true identity. Deanna felt that the studio system was heavily rigged against the individual in favour of the studio. She thought that studios were content to put out the same formula year after year, and if the public got tired of her or Greer Garson or Kay Francis, then there was always a Betty Davis waiting in the wings, eager for that part. She felt that her real fans were not her teenage contemporaries but their parents, who were disillusioned with their own children and saw her as the perfect daughter and emotionally adopted her. This audience was vested in keeping her in the roles she wanted to break free from. In her personal life, she never used the name Deanna, but continued to be called Edna May by those closest to her, and she continued to demand her privacy, which she maintained until her life's end. Deanna's husband of nearly 50 years, Charles, died in March 1999, and in 2013 an article published by the Deanna Durbin Society reported that Deanna had died in the past few days, in a quote by her son Peter David. No other details of her cause of death, funeral or burial were given. Peter also thanked his mother's many fans for their respect for her privacy in the past and at the time of her death. According to the French Social Security Index, an Edna M. David died in Paris on April 17, 2013. Deanna was more than a one-hit wonder. She touched the hearts of many people, including the young Anne Frank. There are 2 pictures of Deanna Durbin on her movie wall of the family hideout in Amsterdam that can still be seen there today. Winston Churchill was also a fan of Deanna's, choosing to play her movies on celebratory wartime occasions. Throughout her career, Deanna famously played the wholesome girl next door, everyone's kid sister, and the can-do all-American girl who gave hope to anyone down on their luck. Deanna had a youthful look combined with an incredible voice. Her movies resonated with audiences of all ages and were a bright spot in the doom and gloom of a dark era in America. She was one of the few childhood stars who walked away from the madness of Hollywood and found a normal and importantly satisfying life with her husband and children on a farm just outside Paris, thus living her life with a happy ending that could be straight out of one of her own movies. Deanna Durbin was a beautiful actress, and a beautiful woman always drove men crazy. Did Larry Hagman love women more than a man should? Let's find out.